Hey everyone, Mitch Joel here. I'm the author of Six Pixels of Separation and Control Alt Delete. I have a podcast also called Six Pixels of Separation, and I've got a new business called Thinkers One. Best advice I ever received was find great partners in any form of work that you do. Worst piece of advice I ever had is this didn't work for insert anyone's name that you've ever received a piece of advice from that mentioned someone else's name that it didn't work for. Those would be my two.
Wow. So let's unpack those. So first, your best advice: find great partners. Did that happen because you found a poor partner, or do you find that out early in your career, or how'd you learn that, Mitch?
It's a great question, Phil, and great to see you. I would say that I have been excessively lucky in finding great partners to the point where I don't think it's fair. If I'm going to be very honest, is one of my secret weapons. If I think to my last venture, Twist Image, which was a digital marketing agency, we started in 2000. We grew it over many, many years, multi-office business that was then acquired by WPP, a very large public communications marketing company. We then transformed it into Mirum, which was aggregating a bunch of other businesses. In that business in particular, we were four equal partners. And we transcended everybody in that business. And through the earnout phase, and even as we decided to move on, we still remained best of friends and stay connected all the time. And it is a testament, in particular, if you don't spend a lot of time understanding the marketing and advertising agency business, it's very uncommon that you would see two partners make it the whole way through, let alone four, and then leave in a place where they would more than happily start another business on their own. In fact, Thinkers One is with one of those three business partners still who I've been working with since 2000. And if I go back to my other ventures that I did in startup, uh, every partner that I had from that side of the business still to this day are friends, people I can count on, people I consider family. And the reason is because I think I've always managed to align myself with people who have a skill set that I'm just don't have an interest in or don't have the skill. So rather, I think partners tend to find like-minded people to work with. What I was always looking for is people who are just as passionate about the things that they do as I am with the things that I do. So if I think about the four equal partners at the agency, I was president, mostly doing sales, doing thought leadership, generating rain for us to catch in buckets. We had a CEO who was older than us, who had successfully done the agency thing and had really good CEO type skills with clients, with employees, with HR, that component. We had another business partner who was really good at the COO, CFO type financial operations. And then another one that was exceptionally great at the actual product, that intersection of creative and technology. And it just created a place where we were able to build philosophies on top of the partnership that really allowed it to flourish. So people think, oh, it's your exit or it's the successes you've had in terms of your book deals or speaking. And when I reflect on that very long period of my career, it really was the partnership. And obviously that results in having great work, great team members, and great people who, now I can look to and watch them ascend in a myriad of industries and be really proud that they were once somehow connected to the work that we were doing.
Wow. So do you think it's because you have a good picker, or do you think it's because you have no ego and you just let them do what they're great at, and they let you do what they're great at, or what do you think, Mitch?
I don't know if it's an either or. I think that my own DNA is I think I can go further together with people than I probably can on my own. And I'm willing to sacrifice, whether it's revenue, margins, percentages, to have something bigger than what I could probably do on my own. And it might be more of the imposter syndrome, my own self-limiting beliefs that make me believe that I need someone who can definitely handle this or someone who could definitely handle that. And maybe non-selfishly, you can hire for those roles. I've always found it better to partner. It's just been my personal experience. Other people might think and look at our business and wonder, well, what if you were only two partners or had done just yourself and hired? And I think it's true. I can look at things like that in reverse. I don't know if I would have had the richness of the experience of going through it and developing these relationships that I've had. That again, I like the idea of partnership, always have.
Yeah, cool. That's really cool. That's encouraging for those out there who maybe have made some tough choices in
Yeah.
business and who want to partner. Finding the right partner can make all the difference in the experience. So I think
I mean,
that's
look, we
really
have a
cool.
very heavy divorce rate, Phil. It doesn't often work. And I think partnerships are probably worse than that. So it is really challenging. And it really is a personality thing, too. I mean, it's not easy to find. But a lot of people say, I'd love to find that partner. And I recognize that I might have been overweighted on the luck side, that I've had these people enter my life at the right time.
Hmm. Very interesting. Very cool. Well, let's talk about that worst advice then, and then talk, and then move into some thought leadership ideas here. The worst advice you shared there is it worked for someone else,
Yeah,
and somebody
this
else is
didn't
telling you that,
work. This didn't
or
work
this
for
didn't work.
so and
Yeah, this
so. So
didn't work
why
for
would
so and so.
so don't do
Yeah.
that. I've always been on the, I mean, you spend a lot of times when you have this advertising marketing world that you're in, seeing everybody talk about the next great case study, whether it's things like the ice bucket challenge or Dove care for beauty, and everyone's trying to decompose, decode it, tear it apart, figure out how they could do their version of it. And I've always said that I don't know if these best case scenarios are the actual way. You'll hear people that we know, love, and trust say you have to do this or you should do this. I think we underplay the component of luck. I think we maybe overplay the idea of just hard work and doing it. I used to spend a lot of time in very specific type of martial arts where I was coaching with one of the world's leading close quarter combative instructors. And he would often say, and I don't know if it was from him or someone else that he took it from, this idea that practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I believe that there's some truism in that when we see people saying, oh, I have 5 million subscribers on YouTube and you can too if you just post, 3 times a day. I don't I don't necessarily buy into those models. So when someone says, this didn't work for so and so, it won't work for you, or this worked for so and so and it'll work for you, I think things are more situational than people want to give them credit for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen, the formula is good. Having a system is good,
Yeah.
but yeah, the results often don't exactly equate, right? Past performance is not indicative of future results.
Yeah, and you also have a third party that we don't want to talk about. And so I spent a lot of time in the music industry, and you would talk about, I always think about these stories where I'll be in the audience watching a band that I know, and I think they're destroying it, and the audience is going crazy and they love it. And I'll squirrel my way backstage, and they're genuinely mad. That was terrible. I was out of tune. This didn't work. And I'm just someone who knows music. Going, I don't know what show they were at. We were at two different shows. And I think that that's really indicative of what the market is. So you can have an audience and you can have a band, and the market is that thing in the middle. It's the thing that happens when things interplay. And then I've seen bands have, the right producer, right record label, great management, great songs. Album comes out, the market doesn't agree. Just timing, a weird sense. I mean, you probably feel this as a speaker when you go to do an event and it's the same deck, and some days the words are just flowing and everything seems to be ripping, and you do it the next day and nothing has changed, but you're just, you're like flailing around trying to, why is, and the audience doesn't know, intuitively that there's just something going on. I think that has a lot to do with the work that we do too, is we tend to produce things that land and it's shocking to us, and then we write something or create something that we think is so great, and it doesn't land. So that third part is the one that I'm always paying attention to. Right? You could follow the directions that someone gives, but if the content and who you are and how it lands in the audience, it's all very tricky. There's no real delineated path here.
Yeah, it's more more chemistry there than anything else.
Yeah.
It's equal parts of different things that often we can't control because we don't have a perfect vacuum to or a perfect
Yeah.
laboratory, right?
Yeah, and people receive things in different ways. I mean, just think about the fact that we had this ice bucket challenge so many years ago, and no one's been able to forget replicated, just have something that has had that level of capturing of the zeitgeist. That's amazing when you think like all these charities, all these people trying things, no one's ever come close.
Yeah. Wow. So that's so interesting. So as a thought leader, someone I certainly look to for insight and things like that. If you can't figure it out, I mean, is there hope there? I mean, or is it just about continuing to try and seeing what works?
I think of it in a much more simplistic way. So I don't struggle with, oh, I got to do another podcast this week, or I got to write an article, or I have a media appearance that I have to make sure I deliver on, or a keynote, or even as I build Thinkers One, how I think about the business. I look at all of the actions that I take as things that I can't stop doing. I can't stop writing. I can't stop wanting to be a part of media appearances like this where I can share and connect with other people who like to think in deeper and broader ways. I can't imagine the day where I would stop doing my weekly podcast, having fascinating conversations with interesting people. I even have a podcast where I interview bass players. And I've been doing that for 8+ years, over 100 episodes. It's a monthly show. I can't imagine a month going by of me not saying, I'd love to take an hour and speak to somebody who creates really cool music. So that's where I start. And I believe if you start from there, the results do wind up accumulating and you can push things forward. And look, I'm going to say it with a lot of humility. I don't have a lot of followers, I don't have a massive audience. And the truth of the matter is, if tomorrow that audience went to zero, I probably wouldn't stop. A lot of people would think about how do they change it up or make it so that it's more accessible. And I've had a million conversations about a million of things that I've created. And there are things that I'm sure I could do. I'm sure things that the audience is probably looking at right now going, why doesn't he do this? Why doesn't he do that? And the answer is I'm open to that and I'm open to trying new things. I'm not sitting on a world where I'm not open to change. But the idea of killing it almost hurts too much. And I think if you're creating content from that place, it's really hard for it not to do well in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's to me that feels like a big difference between kind of thought leadership and passion curation, right? Thought leadership trying to be out front and being, ahead of the curve and almost feeling some FOMO if you're not involved and not in the latest thing versus, this is who I am, this is what I do. I might try in different formulas, but I'm still focused on what I'm passionate about. And even if there were no audience, I would still perform. That's so interesting. That's almost artistic instead of business.
Well, I mean, look, we live in a very narcissistic world, and I don't discount myself from that. We want likes, follows, subscribers, positive commentary. We all do. But I do think that when I frame it with the people who I admire, like, respect, follow, want to hear from, it seems to me like they're showing up and not showing off. They're not here to be, I'm in an airplane, I'm talking to this audience, I'm so honored and humbled. They're just creating very valuable content that they're distributing that is establishing them as people who create in the true sense of audience building versus trying to create this third, fourth wall between them and the audience because it's about stature and about some type of validation so that maybe a speaking bureau or someone else thinks they're more important than they are or sees that they are as important as they are. The people who I've always followed are just constantly coming up with a very interesting concept, idea, piece of content that makes me better. It doesn't make me jealous of them. It doesn't make me want to follow them to have the things they have. It wants me to learn more so that I can actually explore that and actually use it to my benefit.
That's so interesting. Showing up instead of showing off is a great way to really think about that. And I would tend to agree. I don't. I'm not interested in trappings. I'm interested in thought, right? And thought, and I don't know. I guess to talk what we're talking about, right? Some thought leadership. Somebody who makes me think in ways that leads my
Yeah.
thought in a direction that maybe I didn't expect to go. So how do you define thought leadership, Mitch?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a fixed definition for it. My general thinking is around the idea of, am I thinking, seeing, hearing, feeling differently about a topic after I've consumed whatever it is that that person has given me? Has it made me better? Has it grounded me more? Has it given me a different perspective? I start my podcast with the same question. I always say, so who are you and what do you do? It's my thing. I've started ending it in the past month or so with, tell me one thing that not only made you think, but changed the way you think. Could be a person, a book, an article, a song. I don't really care. That to me is the spirit of what a real thought leader is. It's someone who can also, through the work, reframe and change what we normally hold to be a standard belief, or even more importantly, maybe, is when they are going back on things they have actually said because they've rethought them and have seen another level of proof or evidence. So I like that. I also like those who can avoid too many adjectives. You know, you talk about, I'm working at a table, this idea of, I'm working in a white room with gray upholstery and cherry wood table, and I can smell. I don't. It's not that I find those wasteful, weird type of things, but if you can deliver the story in a way that isn't just filled with all these, you said the word trappings. It's one of my favorite words. I feel like there's often a lot of trappings, which to me almost dictate that they don't really have the meat. They're trying to set the table, but they don't really have the meat of the idea or the protein of the idea fully formulated. And so they're trying to distract you with adjectives and other things that might make you believe it more, even though the core idea, might be a bit shaky.
That's interesting. That's very that makes me think a lot about that, and about about what I see and what I do. I need to be more perceptive of that, because certainly I do see, we're seeing less and less meat. I mean, AI now is giving us a lot of adjectives, a lot of noise, a lot of content, whatever you want to call it, right? But it isn't giving us any new thought. It's taking an old thought and maybe reformulating, repackaging. So how do we, in this time of AI, how do we, I guess, how do we figure out what's meat and what's a trapping?
Yeah, I don't fully agree with this idea that it's just giving us more things. AI isn't going to take your job. Someone who's using AI is going to take your job. It's kind of the way, I think Dan Martell said it that way, and I read it, and I think in MIT Technology Review. So I don't know who grabbed that saying. When I think about my work day in and day out, it has fundamentally changed because I use AI in every type of text that I write, every piece of audio I create, every piece of video I create, and every form of image that I create. There is some application in some way, shape, or form where I have AI as my quote unquote co pilot, as my brainstorming buddy, as my junior copywriter, as somebody to provide me with potentially differing perspectives. So I do a lot of weekly radio hits, and they'll reach out and say to me something like, "Oh, it looks like Twitter's dying. What do you think, Mitch?" And I will take my thoughts and put them into bullet points so that when I get on air in a very short period of time, I have my two or three speaking points. But I wouldn't, before I wouldn't have a tool like a chat GPT or GPT-4 where I could go in, put in this article, have it think like a media researcher and give me three or four opposing thoughts. That stimulates my own brainstorming, that helps me dive in, maybe potentially find other thinkers, other perspectives that might reframe how I might see it. So I'll give you a great example of it, actually, like live in real time. We're doing this in a moment where they're talking about this 6-month moratorium on AI. And I think it's silly for a myriad of reasons. But the first idea that came to my brain was, taking a pause for 6 weeks of development beyond GPT-4 feels a bit like when we told the world we just need 2 weeks to, crush the curve type of thing. Just felt weird. And I had other thoughts as well. And I actually used that prompt of asking ChatGPT to think like a media researcher and what would be the opposing ideas. One it came up with, which was very unique in terms of just, it wasn't on my radar. It was, but I hadn't thought of it, which is, you have to get uniformity. You have to get everybody to agree. And in a world where potentially place like China as an example, and the work of Kai-Fu Lee, who's written about this extensively, that China is going to be the great AI superpower. Are they conforming to this idea? Now, again, ChatGPT didn't talk about China or Kai-Fu Lee. I added in that color. But this idea, of course, we're not going to get uniformity by country, which means we might give rise to other superpowers faster than we can even think about it. The other idea that I had in my brain was I think humans have been very adaptive with technology over time, from fire to the wheel to computers and on and on. And I had provoked GPT-4 to come up with reasonings around that. And I felt that it actually quite eloquently was making the case for humanity. Again, whether that's in its own self-serving way, and we can talk about a more dystopian perspective, but I found myself approaching this media hit that then became an article and other assets that I've been creating since, that it actually expanded my thinking. I might have actually been more aligned with the people who are saying, yes, we should, had I not asked it in a very specific way to take me back. So I really do believe that the people who are going to use it well will use it incredibly well. And the people who are going to use it poorly are the same people right now who are building content farms and writing crappy blog posts and doing bad SEO. Oh, they're going to have all of this like disinformation. We already had a lot of disinformation. We already had content farms in strange third world countries where people are just trying to make some money. And so they would take this work and do it. Now we're just automating it. Now, whether that's good or not for the global economy and whether or not that doesn't create a greater digital divide, this story has yet to play out. But the deeper thinkers around this have deeper thoughts about it. Some of the deeper thinkers, people like Kevin Kelly, founder of Wired Magazine, wrote The Inevitable and What Technology Wants, recently said in a conversation with me that, we hardly even know what social media is. And we're going to put like a stop on these are people who are probably smarter than you and I together, Phil. They're making very legitimate comments, and perhaps their thinking is muted in a world where names like Elon Musk get the media hits. So I have a lot of ways in which I use AI beyond just text generation that I think has been very additive, and it's made me better, a lot faster, and it's given me confidence. It's given me the ability to jump over the psychological or nervous hurdles I typically have when it comes to content creation, the things that give me pause. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Often just the activity of taking it and pumping into GPT helps me get the engine lubricated, if you will, and gets it going. So, I don't want to be in a small segment of people who think it's all powerful and otherwise it's going to be this terribly destructive thing. I think our concerns should be very legitimate around AI. They are not regulated, its ability to think autonomously. These are all challenges we have to face. But I think, like anything, it's somewhat ambiguous. It's neither good nor evil. It's what the people who are using it for use it for. So that's where I sit on that one.
Yeah, I agree. My dad texted me the other day. He watched some special in our little itty bitty town in northern Wisconsin where I grew up about AI. He's like, "Oh, Phil, AI is scary." I said, "Dad," I said, "I use it every single day."
Yeah.
He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Dad, it's only scary if the person using it is there to scare you.
Well, I mean,
I'm not trying to scare
well,
anyone."
it can be scary in the sense of these are large language models that are doing things that the developers can't even necessarily understand. That it does need rails, it does need some form of regulation, it does need oversight. We have to make sure that the biases that we have as humans aren't innately built into these systems. We have to make sure where these systems are deployed. I think you and I are tinkering with it on a very superficial level. So it's helping us professionally, but I can't not give pause. I don't dismiss any of the concerns that we're seeing in those who are calling for the moratorium at all. In fact, I think they're very important. My my concern is that we do a moratorium versus work on it at the same time. Get the policymakers, get the developers, get people working at the same time versus creating a scenario where you might have other nations cede a lot more power a lot quicker. That to me would be very scary. And suddenly, I can get dystopian and think about AIs fighting one another. I mean, it's very easy and natural to see. And again, the thing that people have to understand that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is these are exponential technologies that we can't comprehend. We only acknowledge exponential growth in technology well after it's happened. So we have to understand that when we're in it, it's hard to see. And that gives me, like I said, every concern that they raise is a legitimate concern. My only rolling of the eyebrow happens over this idea of a 6 month moratorium about it. But I think every concern is real and legitimate in this case. This is a very, very scary and potentially cognizant technology.
Interesting. Interesting. Much to
All the
ponder
easy
there,
stuff.
Mitch.
Yeah.
With yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, all the
We
easy
can
stuff,
solve
of
this, Phil.
course,
You
right?
and I. Come on. We got this.
Yeah, we've got 10 or
Yeah.
15 more minutes. What the heck, right? It won't take
Yeah.
us long. So, or not. But with that, I talk to me then about how, you kind of you do that, right? Beyond text and how that I guess maybe does challenge you. I mean, can you give me another
Yeah. I'll give
example
you,
of how you
I
might
sure.
use that?
Yeah. I mean, I use one of my favorite pieces of software that I talk about is Descript. And I use it for all of my podcasting editing and as well as editing of videos and things that I create. It's an incredibly powerful tool and they keep updating it. And I think if you're a content creator and not using this script, you're probably way better at content creation than I am because I just need that tool. I'm not a Pro Tools person but it's amazing because what you do is you basically take whatever file it is, audio and video, and you dump it in and it turns it into a text-based transcription. And then you can edit the audio or video. In my case, we'll talk primarily about audio by editing the text. So if you say a lot, I can just go through all your ums and delete them. And then I can check the waveform to make sure it's not like cutting and weird. But what's really cool with their AI is I've uploaded about 40 minutes. I took a keynote that I had on YouTube and I just uploaded the audio to the script. And now when I highlight a word that, let's say I said, Phil, your new magazine is great. And I meant to say, Phil, your new book is great. I can highlight the word magazine, click the overdub button, write the word book in, and it will say the word book in my voice, completely mixed with the audio to the point where I've challenged anybody to listen to my podcast and tell me which is my voice and which is the AI voice, because I can tell you when I edit it, I can't tell the difference because if I could, I wouldn't use it. That type of technology is just groundbreaking. I mean, I think you can understand, as someone who creates content, the ability to not have to like stop that file, come back here into the studio, do a voiceover, hope that when you lay it over, it sounds right. Incredible. It has another asset in there where once you're done, you can select the file and it will add on what's called the studio filter. And again, using some type of AI, it's able to make it sound extremely warm and real. And even if the words are a bit off or clicky, it will make them blend and connect. And it's wild to me. I mean, I don't know how I sound right now. I'm guessing it sounds pretty warm because I know that's a good mic, but the room is really loud and I don't have any sound processing in here. So when I record the podcast raw, it's a pretty loud room. And you know what that's like. It sounds echoey, a bit tinny. It completely compresses and kills it automatically and just makes it sound like I'm recording in a voice booth. So there's just really cool applications. Some of them are subtle, some of them aren't, that are powerful. Images, there's the Dall-E's and all that of the world, yes, but I'll get your picture sometimes for my podcast and it's low res. There's multiple AI tools where it will up the resolution of it with just a click. I've seen it take really old pictures, black and white ones, and colorize it to the point where I've shown a relative and said, this picture of this relative who's now in their 80s as a child. And I would say, what color was the dress in this? And they'd say, it's like a light blue, violet dress. And you look at the picture and it's exactly right. So I guess it's taking the greenery enabled with that to then assign what that dress might have been. Like, just astounding stuff. So I could talk about it for hours. I think that its deployment and the power of it is profound, profound.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
powerful. That is powerful. So with that, let's pivot and let's talk about your new company, Mitch. Let's talk about Thinkers One, which is a super cool idea, like bite-sized learning from thought leaders that gives you kind of just what you need. So is there like no story? Do they just know
No,
their
no, no,
smart points?
no.
Or
So
how does
yeah,
that
so
work?
the idea, it comes out of demand. People start asking you the same thing over and over again, and you realize maybe there's something here. For me during the pandemic and even before, I would get things like, hey, I don't need a keynote, but I'd love for you to pop into our management meeting and talk for 15 minutes about where disruption's going, or about AI or chat GPT, or hey, don't need the full 60 minutes or any consulting, but would you record like 20 minutes and I can just play that in my meeting? Things like that. And the answer to that question would normally be, yeah, of course I can do that. But the workflow is the same amount of work as booking a keynote. And that's the problem with it is I've got to speak to you, hear your needs, go back and forth. Okay. Get you to sign a contract. Okay. Do my little recordings, show up live. Then I got to chase you to pay. Like all of that stuff, it's the same amount of work. So why would I do that? And then also the value in terms of the money exchange. So we came up with Thinkers One, which is myself and Aubrey, who was one of my business partners back at the agency. And the idea was, can we get a whole bunch of thought leaders and build this marketplace so they can charge what they want and offer what they want around asynchronous and synchronous video experiences that are not for your big keynote event and not for maybe your everyday meeting, but for things like your lunch and learn or your big gathering, or we're getting the team together. Now, the beautiful thing about the product is it really does work whether everybody's physically here in person, whether it's hybrid or whether it's virtual. It's one of the few things I think that transcends where the actual team is. And really what it is it is three products, but it's really two. There's a synchronous and an asynchronous product. So one is you can book a thought leader to just pop in to your meeting, to your event for 15 minutes. And the other one is the thought leader predefines a handful of topics or one or two, whatever it might be. And if that's a topic that's relevant to the gathering, the get together for you, your client, or whatever, you choose it. Now, what happens when you choose it is there's a personalization form. So you can say, hey, this is for Phil, my company's XYZ. I'm bringing together all my salespeople. It's the first, we do this every single month. I want you to talk about negotiation skills and whatever. That's why I chose what you did. Don't forget to mention it's Sally's birthday. Don't forget to mention that Paul got engaged to Mary. Like you can go through all of these things. You pay for it on your credit card, and then within a few days, the thought leader is either showing up in your meeting live for a kind of AMA vibe, or they've recorded this video that's personalized just for your team and your gathering or your client. So it works because we've essentially e-commerced this product that typically, if somebody wanted to do something for their meeting, they send you an email, they send me, they go back, and it's like a lot of work. Now, the fact that we put this into this system with the great thought leaders that we have, it makes it really easy for companies to order it. It makes it really easy for the thought leader to do. They just get the order, either shoot the video for the client specifically or show up, and then they get paid. So it works for everybody in terms of just making it easier and accessible to make people like you and I more accessible to everyday meetings.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's
That's
fun.
really cool. So yeah, so working synchronously, asynchronously, teams on site, teams all remote, team is hybrid. Lots of ways for that to work. Have you found any instances, Mitch, where that's not a good fit for someone, where that's not what they need?
Well, I mean, no. And I mean that in the sense of it's still new and it's just getting out there. We're just getting the word out there about it now. We have a lot more thought leaders to add that are signed up for the platform. Where doesn't it work? I guess if you're doing a massive event, one could argue, well, you want somebody physically there. I could argue that we have a great tool that will allow you to put some interstitials up in between your physical event. Like I haven't creatively been able to think of a way that you couldn't use this. So imagine that you and I spoke last year, content marketing world as an example, and they can't have us back because we just spoke there last year. What they could do is they could buy a couple of these, we call them think ideas, these pre-recorded videos where it's like, hey, everybody, it's Mitch. I was there at Content Marketing World last year. I want to tell you two things about ChatGPT or AI that you may not have thought about that I didn't have a chance to share with you. Now, you could run that in the hallways. You could run that on the big screen before your keynote. I might be hired through this idea of even introducing the new keynote speaker. They might buy them because, hey, you want to run them after for continuity. So last year they had Phil speak, this year they had Mitch speak, and then after the event, we're going to have a bunch of these think ideas from Phil and Mitch throughout the year to keep you connected. So I can always, from a marketing brain, come up with a great application for this. During the holiday season that just passed, people were buying it to thank individuals on their team. People were buying it to wish their team members a happy holiday. People were buying it for clients to wish their clients a happy holiday. So what you learn when you do these things is they're often used not in the way the inventor intended them, and they're being used creatively. I'm seeing people use them for book launches where instead of flying the person in, they book these Think Lives so that they can come in and spend 15 minutes talking about the book. So it's been really boundless. And if anything, Aubrey and I are just inspired to figure out new ways to productize it and bring on more relevant and powerful thought leaders to keep adding to it. There's languages, countries we can explore, different categories. So we think it's a fun way. I mean, look, we're in a time where people are more disengaged than ever. And that's just the truth of work. So if you're a business thinking, how can I engage my team beyond the same meetings that we're doing in this world where things are virtual, hybrid, physical, whatever, I really believe this is a great connection because it's going to be based off of your needs because you're choosing either the thought leader or the content based off of a challenge you have. And it's a really cost-effective way to constantly be showing your team that you are thinking about them and want them to be better. Ultimately, this is what's happening in this moment in time with employees is they don't feel valued. So this is a great way to make people feel real value.
And to reinforce a message from a leader is a great thing to hear from a thought leader, right? Instead of saying, here, Mitch, read this book and you'll hear what we believe about culture. Instead, let's bring in Dory Clark and here's 10 minutes on playing the long game or something like that. Far more effective.
Yeah, I mean, look, how many times have you been in a business where somebody sent a link around and said, watch this TEDx talk, and you're like, great, and you file it all, we'll get to it later. That's very different than if we were in this management meeting, like you said, and before we go, Dory Clark is going to spend 15 minutes with us talking about XYZ, or Dory has recorded this video for us about this specific issue that we're dealing with. That has a lot more resonance to me than don't forget to click on that link I sent you or read that article we sent you. You're also making the meeting memorable. One of the challenges we have in this, I call this torso-based world, right? We just see people's torsos, is that it's not the same as protein forms as when we're there in person, but it is very much live and in the moment. And so if something really radical happened right now, it would be, remembered, it would be stitched in TikTok, things would happen to it. And I really do believe that both employees and leaders are understanding that they can create these real, live, and in the moment situations, but it's hard. I really think Thinkers One is just an easy gateway if leaders just think about it. It would be memorable if we had somebody like that, a Laura Gassner Auding, an Adam Alter, Rashad Tabakawala, a Dory Clark, show up into our weekly meeting and give us a piece of knowledge relevant to the work that we're doing. And that is my actual hope for it. I mean, the truth is, life has been very good to me. I did not have to start another business. I was very busy just speaking and creating content. But I realized two things. One is I believe a lot of the people that are my friends and my peers who've written incredible books and who are great speakers and great academics and journalists and just captains of industry should have their message sent to more and more people. That was one. The other side is most of the time when we speak, when we consult, when we sell courses, we're really selling it to the highest common denominator, the people who can afford the ridiculous prices that everybody charges in this industry. To make that type of thinker accessible to a startup, to a small business, to a nonprofit, to an NGO, or even to a department within a larger organization where the sales lead or the management lead or the marketing lead has a credit card and can slap it down. That's really profound because what happens is our messages wind up going not to this person who could afford it, but to the persons who really need it. So it's a bit of a social business for me too, in the sense of I love that when I can help spread the brilliant thinking of these people who I know, like, trust, and respect.
Wow, that's super cool. I had
Yeah, it's
not
fun.
considered that as that social aspect of that being that is such a beautiful part of that. Because to your point, yeah, for 25K, right, we can get some magical event, but for much less, we can get some of the impact and some of the insight and capture some of that and keep our employees and our teams engaged.
And you're,
That's
yeah, and
beautiful.
you're also relegating that type of content to like once a year or twice a year when we all gather up and go to that one industry association event. Making that type of real thinking and that similar type of engagement accessible in a more frequent way, I think is one of the easiest ways to move us away from this position we find ourselves in where employees are feeling so disenfranchised. It's just a thing. It's a theory. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right.
Yeah. Wow. Much to think about there, Mitch. So if we were to think about one thing maybe that's coming next or besides Chat GPT and more AI and things like that, what would the one thing that you're got your eye on that isn't quite here yet, but that when it comes you think is going to change some games?
I mean, it's hard not to use AI as a catch-all. I think that what we're seeing right now is really, really elementary. So, why I'm so attentive to the space is not just the time in which it was adopted, but I remember very well early days of blogging. And then you think about how Flickr and images came along, and then audio, and then the power of video. Just think about that in the relation to what we're seeing with things like just Chat GPT and the scale of which it could really impact front end, back end, B2B, B2C. And by the way, we're seeing a B2C product. We're seeing a commercialized product that's got us all talking. What we failed, or what we're now starting to realize, is a lot of this AI technology has been deployed on the back end for quite some time. So watching the impact of this commercialized product now hit the backside of the B2B and watch that grow. Um, I think AI is a good catch-all, but what I'm most excited and or nervous about is this constant loop of exponential growth. I think that's where many of us need to take a bit of a step back and recognize that we are in this massive loop and change. And so we're seeing grandiose statements made. 1/3 of our workforce is going to be changed because of AI and all this. It's overwhelming. I don't know where it will land, but I ultimately do think that that is the one place that, as much attention as I'm paying to it, I feel like I can't keep up. I feel like I'm not even treading water in that pool. And if I feel that way, I can't imagine what someone whose job it isn't to do this is. Like, this is my job to do, and I'm like, I can't keep up with all these ideas and technologies. So I do think that that's the one that we have to be very, very careful with and very, very interested in.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, Mitch, lots of stuff to think about today, lots of stuff to consider. For more from Mitch, go to Thinkers1, O-N-E, thinkersone.com, mitchjoel.com, and the podcast. Tell us about the Bass Players podcast. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of fun for those that are maybe interested in music more than they are business.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was in the music business for many, many years and had the pleasure of interviewing a whole bunch of people. I think you're going to like this story, Phil, because it shows how things collide and it involves people who I think like, and respect as well. I found myself close to 10 years ago in New York City having a coffee with Seth Godin, who I've been fortunate enough to know. And he's been, probably too kind and generous with his time and his attention for me. And I was talking about this idea and that I used to play bass. I was actually thinking originally that whatever city I was in, I would take a bass lesson with one of these crazy bass players who are in the city. And I was talking about this, and he started mentioning this guy, Corey. I stopped him one point. I said, "What are you talking about?" So I thought, Corey Brown, who was his partner at Squidoo, is the guy who founded NoTreble.com. And I was like, no, I had no idea he's like, yeah. I'm like, No Treble is like the biggest. It's the place. He goes, well, let me introduce you guys. So turned out that Corey was a fan of 6 Pixels of Separation. My podcast had been running. And his line was, why don't you just do a 6 Pixels like conversation, but with these bass players? And these are people whose stories have never really been told. People don't think about the bass player, they want the singer or the guitarist. And they're usually really interesting and have been in very interesting scenarios. And it's an instrument that I love, and it's a music. It's a sound that I've always connected to. And at the time, we were very lucky that Robert Trujillo, who's the bass player in Metallica, had just been producing a documentary about a very famous bass player who passed away very young, Jaco Pastorius, another legend. And so for the first episode, we managed to get Robert Trujillo from Metallica to spend an hour with me and talk about all things Metallica and Jaco Pastorius, which I have a love for him as well. And that led to a whole bunch of introductions, and the site was doing well on its own, but the podcast became a monthly show that leads us to this moment in time, which is, I don't know when this is coming out, but this Thursday, we're releasing our 100th episode. And it's the first time that we're bringing back one of the players, and it happens to be Robert Trujillo from Metallica. to not only celebrate the 100th episode, but Metallica has a brand new album called 72 Seasons coming out. So the timing just couldn't have been perfect. And Robert's always been really kind and generous with his time with us. And they're very fun conversations. You do not have to like the bass to enjoy any of these conversations. If you are just interested in music and hearing it from the perspective of somebody who you may not have heard of and who these people have played with, I mean, a lot of these players have played with, you could listen to music all day and they played on 20% of those songs, like some of these players in sessions and otherwise. And the stories they have about people like Prince and Michael Jackson and all of these classic bands. We had the bass player on who's the only living member of the band of Gypsies, Jimi Hendrix. And he was Jimmy's friend in the army. And he's telling stories about like Hendrix before, when he was in the army playing guitar and became his bass player and just decided to not stay with him because they were so poor and he thought there's no future in this and missed being a part of the craziness of what just crazy stories that you would never get anywhere else. So that you can get at notreble.com. And that is a real passion project of mine. It's been so much fun to just collect these oral histories. It's been great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, folks, if this is your first experience with Mitch Joel, get to know him more. Check out his podcast, visit his website, get to know Thinkers One, and just soak in some of the brilliance that is the thought leader of Mitch Joel. Thank you, my friend. I so appreciate you. This was fun.
Phil, great seeing you. And I just hope we can do this more often because we get a chance to hang out. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.